Good evening, everyone. Time for episode 34 of Kerr's Rage, part 1 of the Duaredheim Staff Saga, by me. Starting at the top of page 358, the party has uncovered the dragon Modrul's treasure and is investigating the dragon's hoard. Okay, here we go. Reassured by Dao's uncharacteristic praise, he realized that his Lyoselfar friend had changed much in only a few days. With newfound confidence, he took up the wonderful scimitar and drew forth its blade, and lo! A great thunderclap issued forth, and all of them jumped in surprise. In a rush, Atrandoru's powers became known to him. With the magnificent blade in his hand, he could summon the storm, and all of its powers would be his. The sword was a masterpiece. Its ivory handle curled around his hand like the jaws of a great lion, and its long curved blade rippled with the blue waves of a master's work. The handguard was diamond-shaped, and the image of storm clouds were etched into its face with perfection. The scabbard was of untarnished bronze inlaid with silver, and runes were carved into it. Here was Atrandoru, a sword of legend, wielded anew by Leander Forestborn. He studied the weapon and then strapped the scabbard to his waist, where his old sword had been. He then lashed his old sword to the side of his forest pack, hilt upright, so that he could quickly reach for it, if the need should arise. But his intention was to wield Atrandoru the next time that they faced an enemy. The treasure was filled with many more wonders. Among them were scroll tubes sealed with beeswax. The wax was now hard and cracked with age. Kaelor opened them, and all except one had leaked and had their contents destroyed by water. The sealed tube held several rolled parchments that seemed to outline an experimental magic of some kind. His curiosity was piqued, but the spells were incomplete and would be useless without some further key to unlock their secrets. Tarek found a new sword to replace his broken one. In fact, it seemed much like his old sword, except that it was completely untarnished, and in the absence of light it gave off a faint red glow. But although Kaelor and Dao examined it, they couldn't guess as to what enchantments it might hold. Once all the chests were dragged out of the mud, Kaelor used his tools to break off the rest of the rusted locks and pry open the lids. Activating the scepter, he scanned their contents, and its glow was fiercely bright. Its dowsing pull led them to the centermost chest. Within it were many items of gems and jewelry, including necklaces of pearls, bracelets of gold, and crowns of silver with gems inlaid. Sifting through the glittering pile, he found a great diamond that was far from ordinary. The size of his fist, it had thousands of perfectly cut facets that reflected the scepter's light and a gyroscope of color all around him. On a strange whim, he touched the scepter to it, and as he'd mysteriously anticipated, it had pointed in an entirely different direction. The new line of pull was south and down, toward the absolute rear of the cave. "Maybe we missed some of the treasure," Kerr said. "I don't think so. My guess is that it points towards the second piece of the Duaredheim staff." "Odin knows how far that is," Dartin said with little optimism. "No matter how far," Carmen said, "that's where we must go. But for now, there are still more treasures to explore." "Spoken like a true dwarf," Kerr said. "Let's get to it." There seemed to be treasure enough for them all, to leave with some token, either large or small. But for Dartin, the torn armor seemed to call to him more than any coin or jewel. Leander helped him to clean out all that remained of its previous inhabitant, and after careful inventory, they felt that they had uncovered the entire suit of armor. The breastplate, godbrace, placket, and gauntlets were as pristine as the day that they were made, while the cuisse, pollen, and greaves were perfect below. The cut that separated the armor had sliced through the guard of vambrace near the waist. It was a clean tear, a perfect slice made by Modrul's perfect blades. He couldn't resist trying it on. Leander helped him to assemble it piece by piece. It seemed to fit perfectly. Surprisingly light and flexible at the joints, it barely hindered his movements at all. What a wonder it is, he thought. In fact, it fit so well that it seemed that it had been made for him alone. But when he donned the last portion of the incredible suit and strapped the last buckle, disaster struck. The armor became searing hot, and from somewhere within itself it began to smolder, emitting a dreadful wail like the sound of shifting planks in a barn, badly blown by the storm. "Leander, something's wrong! Run!" Indeed, at that moment, he knew that he'd acted foolishly in wearing it without Kalor's further examination. His fingers were burned as he raced to unbuckle it, but the magic that he'd unleashed had gone past the point of reversal, and the energies locked within it began to clash in a rending battle all of their own. The very fibers of it curled out and sprung, bursting outward in a final, titanic explosion, sending tiny shards of metal spinning away from him in all directions. The outward force was so great that D'Artagnan, acting as the focal point, remained standing in place throughout the event. That is, until his blackened and smoldering body fell forward into unconsciousness. The blast had left hundreds of metallic shards protruding from the surroundings all around him, and Leander was badly cut by them. Tarek had been struck in the face by some of the shrapnel some 100 feet in the distance. "What's the damn priest got himself into now?" Tarek said as he ran to help. "What in the 9 hells? He looks like he ran through a vat of burning oil." "He tried on the armor," Leander said, "and it exploded." "He's still breathing," Carmen said. "Help me get him to his bedroll." Gently laying him down, they carefully washed his burned and soot-blackened flesh. Despite terrible bruises, his skin wasn't burned past the point of healing and wouldn't scar. "He'll live. He's in shock, but his skin's not as bad as it looks. How he escaped with such slight injuries, I can't explain." "We're all damn lucky," Tarek said. "If we intend to continue on this quest, we're sure to need his special skills again. We should use one of the orc's potions on him. I'd hate to have him die from shock after what he's been through. If one's not enough, give him 2. He's more valuable than 1,000 such potions." The Helm. Lying among the coins and other precious items of gold, Kalor discovered the great helm. It was clearly the complement to the armor that they'd found. Similar in design to the greater helms of knights, its visor was made of some transparent substance that seemed equally as strong as the metal around it. A finely woven and impossibly small ringed chain mesh draped from the helmet's base to protect the wearer's neck. The chin, face, and ear guards were formed together in the shape of folded dragon's wings. Within it was a resilient padding softer than leather, yet more protective. In all, it was a masterful work, and Kalor found runes etched onto the inside of the visor. With Dao's help, they were able to magically translate their pronunciations, but their true function and meanings remained unknown despite their best efforts. "Command words," Dao guessed. "I agree," said Kalor, "but if it's cursed like the armor, I fear for its wearer." "I think that the armor exploded because it was torn. This seems to be in perfect condition. I believe that whoever wears it will be safe, even if some magic still remains within it. Perhaps, but only Carmen, Tarek, and the half-elves might be big enough to wear it." "Might be able to wear what?" Carmen said, overhearing them. "This helm." "It's beautiful, but I'm not sure if I'm willing to risk trying it on. Leander, would you wear it? I could never wear something so restricting. I can't stand to be in confined spaces." "It should be safe," Dao said. "It's not damaged. If its magic were linked to the armor, it would have blown up as well." "Okay, I'll try it. Just be ready to get it off of me if it starts acting strange." They taught her how to pronounce each of the runic inscriptions and practiced with her until she knew them all perfectly. "We have no idea what it might be enchanted with," Kalor said, "so be ready to take it off quick." "That's hardly reassuring, but I guess someone's got to do it." Lowering it over her ears, she placed it snugly onto her head. Once the chain mesh came to rest upon her shoulders, it suddenly shrank to fit snugly against her neck. The helm was alive. She screamed. All the while she tried desperately to pull it off. Trying to help her in her wild attempt at freedom proved unsuccessful. Everyone, including Carmen, thought that it had somehow come to life and was in the process of strangling her. But though she tried with all of her might, it wouldn't come off. Then finally, after her initial panic had passed, she discovered that she was really quite all right after all. In fact, she couldn't remember having breathed so easily ever before. Not only was it quite comfortable to wear, but her vision was no more obstructed than when she wore no helmet at all. Standing still for a long while, a myriad of thoughts raced through her head. "Are you okay, Carmen?" "I'm fine. It's really not so bad after all. I just hope that I can get it off sometime in the near future." "Try the words that we taught you," Kalo said. "Okay, but you all better stand back a bit. I am likely to breathe fire or something." "Sheena," and all the world around her glowed with the heat of their bodies in the campfire. "What is it?" Tao asked. "I'm not sure, but I think that it's how your people see the world, in the dark." "If it's so, then you see heat as the Lyalfar see it. The rocks should look blue or gray, our bodies orange, darker near the center." "Yes, that's it." "Speak the next word," Kalo urged. "El Venera," and the world turned purple and bright. "Everything around me is purple, no, violet. I could see all of the way to the back of the cave." Looking above her toward the long, jagged stalactites, she gasped, "Wow, there are hundreds of them. No, thousands." "Of what?" "Bats." "Truly, it is a powerful helm," Tao said. "For you describe how the Dark Ones are said to see, better even than the dwarves in the darkest places of the world." "Speak the next word," Kalo said, his curiosity piqued. "Dar Kroth," and a transparent membrane appeared, sealing the helm firmly against her neck. Air rushed in from somewhere behind her head. Shaken up, she breathed hesitantly, not daring to move. The air had a peculiar smell, but soon she was more awake than ever, and truly energized. "I'm okay. The helm seems to be helping me to breathe." "Perhaps you could survive underwater," Tao said. "Amazing." "There are 3 more commands left." "Shoo-num," and all the sounds around her were amplified tenfold. When she realized what had happened, she listened to the rhythmic breathing of her friends, and could soon discern the beating of their hearts, and even the tiny breaths of the bats above her. Her comrades' voices thundered into her head like Orcan war drums. "Quiet, you're deafening me." "Speak the next command." Revertor, and her amplified hearing and improved vision returned to normal. That turned everything off. Mew arm, and her last command caused the helm's protective membrane to retract and the chain mesh to relax its grip upon her neck. Removing it and shaking out her tangled hair, she held it out to return it to Tao. "I think that it's rightfully yours," he said. "I could never own such a wondrous thing," she said, truly amazed. "Of us all, it will do you the most good. All of us have natural night vision, but you do not. If you should find yourself alone and in the dark, this could save you." They all agreed then that it was hers and hers alone. Kalo also found 2 items of gnomish smithcraft in the second chest, a small dagger with a jeweled hilt, well balanced for throwing, and a short sword meant for gnomes' hands. Its blade held a fine edge despite its age, and its scabbard was a flawless work of mithril. They were priceless weapons, but their enchantments would remain a mystery until they were tested. Kerr discovered a beautiful longbow in the third chest, which had no string. It was beautifully carved and etched with runes. "Carmen, take a look at this." Grasping the bow, she discovered that she could suddenly read the runes that were inscribed on it, but how she knew them she didn't know. The first word brought a magical thread of energy to the bow in the place of its string, and when she drew it back, a magical arrow formed. Shimmering with radiant white energy, she tested it upon a distant stalagmite, and it tore a great piece of the stone free and blackened the face of the rock. It was the helm wearer's bow, Dow said knowingly, but even his great weapons could not match the strength of the mighty Bodrul. Then the bow is common as well, Kerr said, a fine weapon for a fair lady. She blushed, for in her life she'd rarely been reminded of the fact that she was a beautiful woman. For a moment she regretted the path that her father had chosen for her to follow, wishing that she could have been more like her sisters instead, and courted by eligible noblemen. But such thoughts could only dwell in her mind for a short time, for she was a warrior as good as any man, and noble men were often far from noble. How many of her sisters had seen the wonders that she had seen? None, nor would they ever. No, it was good enough to just be herself. In the fourth chest, Dow found a small buckler that suited his fighting style well. It wouldn't hinder his two-handed swordsman's technique, but it would give him some of the protection provided by a shield. Well forged, it buckled comfortably onto his left forearm. Upon his face was the casting of an outstretched lion leaping towards some helpless prey. Additionally, he found a beautiful girdle crafted by elves. It was made of fine chain rings and metal plates which protected both his groin and kidneys. Added to his human coat of mail, it was a fine complement that suited him well. Strangely, Karina wished for nothing more than new clothes. From the time that she'd been captured until now, she'd been forced to wear garments that either didn't fit or had grown ragged from wilderness travel. Searching through the fifth chest, she found a small bundle wrapped in what appeared to be dragon hide. Within the package rested a fine suit of leathers crafted for a woman, small as befitting an elfin one. Unfolding it to test its length, she glanced at Kerr in fear and wonder, for it seemed to them both that the gods themselves had foreseen their future need and hidden these items for them alone. Thinking little more of their strange fortune, she tried it on with barely disguised delight. The fit was nearly perfect, and despite its age, it was as supple and unblemished as when it was first made. "It fits perfectly," she said to Kerr, who turned his back while she suddenly redressed herself. "You should warn me the next time you're going to do that." "Oh, don't be silly. It's nothing you haven't seen before." Turning around slowly to avoid further embarrassment, his mouth dropped in surprise. Karina's suit was well padded at the elbows, knees, and other vulnerable areas, and fit her in such a complimentary style that he bid her to put her rags back on, as it was surely too much for his lonesome eyes to bear. Laughing, she put her old tunic on over it and strapped her weapons belt back into place. "Is this better?" she asked innocently, knowing full well her own power. Kerr only sighed and shook his head. He'd spent so long away from Duaredheim that sometimes he forgot that he was one. Datin was woken by his pain. Every muscle, bone, and inch of his skin felt burned and bruised. Lifting his small mirror from his pack, he examined his body. Silently he prayed that Odin would heal him, but his prayers went unanswered. It seemed that Odin wanted to punish Datin the foolish. Knowing that no further help would come to him, he tried to put his clothes back on, but it was impossible agony. He'd been sunburned at sea, but never like this, and never over every inch of his body. His friends were all busy, so he lay back down in exhaustion. Within seconds, the mercy of sleep was upon him. Odin was a wise teacher, but never cruel, only just. There were times when drinking and foolish acts could be justified, and others where cunning and wise action were far more appropriate. The final chest held even more items of grandeur. Kerr found a well-balanced short sword. He belted its scabbard over his right hip so he could draw it out in a cross-body motion. He was able to fight ambidextrously in many different styles of combat, and with the enchanted weight of Corin Koth, he could safely wield it one-handed at times, giving him the option of an offhand blade. His axe rested in his back sheath, and he also found a small round helm to replace his ruined one. Rummaging through the same chest, Tarek found a wonderful cloak woven from strong, dark fabric. Rippling with a rainbow of colors, it mimicked its environment like the southern chameleon. "Kerr, take a look at this." Putting it on, he tested it. When you're still, you're nearly invisible. If I didn't already know that you were there, I'd never have seen you. And when I move, almost as good, but I can see it shimmer as it tries to duplicate the terrain around you. There are several clay decanters inside the chest as well. Potions be my guess. Maybe Kalor can make something of them. When they were searching through the last of the treasure, Karina found a map written in some unknown language. It seemed to show a secret way leading into the cave from far below. Orienting the map to match the lay of Modrul's lair, they discovered that the sketched passageway traveled underground into the south. Its entrance lay somewhere near the back wall of the cave. Maybe that passage leads to the next part of our quest, Kalor said. This is all too much to believe, Leander said. It's as if everything's been left for us to find. Never look a dragon's gifts in the mouth, Kerr said. Ye might get burned. The skein of our lives has already been woven, Dartin said. Every step takes us closer to our fate. But this, the armor, map, and treasure, it cannot be mere coincidence. I'm tempted, Carmen said, to say that Ilmatar works in mysterious ways. But this is the treasure of an ancient dragon. There was bound to be something here for all of us. But even the scepter implies a way out the back of the cave. It seems like someone's setting us up. If it is a setup, Dow said, then it was crafted hundreds of years ago by someone who could see into the future. If we are to continue with this quest for the staff, Tarek said, we must exhaust all of the possibilities. Yes, Dow said, but I believe that many of these items that seem like such strange coincidences were not actually left here for us, but were rather brought here by the Vanir warrior to kill Modrul. Maybe, Kalor said. He'd hoped that the secret passage would bring him upon Modrul unawares. But if you were a dragon, Karina said, wouldn't you know if there were other ways into your lair? If I knew of such a tunnel, Tarek said in agreement, and I were a dragon, then I'd do something to plug it up. Or cover it up, Carmen said. The treasure, Kerr said. And they all agreed that the passage, if there was one, would be there. Vlad Sherroan. Deep beneath the mountain, Farad Moor, in the deepest, darkest passageways of the ancient fortress within it, walked a dark Elfar commander of forbidding power. His entire company lay nearly dead all around him, 40 orcs and 6 of his Drakar Noir in all. They challenged the Lord of Shadow Demons to possess the ornate vessel that was the Duaredheim staff and won. 4 components were needed to assemble it, and now only 2 pieces of it remained out of his grasp. The staff and rod were his, and only the gem and the circlet remained to be found. With it, he would achieve the ultimate power for his people. He would become the first male to rule Dragonia in thousands of years. But it would be a long and arduous path, one that he was more than willing to follow. His company had won by only the smallest of margins. The Lord of Shadow had been a deadly adversary, killing every warrior that came against him, and despite Derek's protective spells and his own great enchantments, the demon had found ways to attack and hurt them. Even with Derek's vast necromantic aid, he had been forced to use up vast amounts of his own power in order to achieve victory. Indeed, even he himself had been wounded. Now that the staff was in his hands and his victory assured, he concentrated on saving the lives of as many of his men as he could. The elders of his kind would have seen such action as weakness. But his father had known the power of loyalty, duty, and honor. His war masters were veterans, both skilled and powerful, and his Drakar Noir were irreplaceable. To sacrifice them when they could be saved would be a foolish waste of power, and so he kept them among the living, with the immense resiliency of his telekinetic mind. With senses far beyond the norm, he reached out to them with his indomitable will, forcing their hearts to keep beating. He sealed their torn arteries and held back their dying blood. He would not allow them to die. With his powerful hands, he activated his spider mirror and opened a portal to the hospital in Drakon Muirfalor, which was the Orcs' pyramid fortress in their sacred tundra. Once it was open, he reached out to each of his men in turn. Enveloping them with waves of telekinetic energy, he caused them to rise up and march, zombie-like, through the fortress passageways of Faradmore and through his portal. Each of them was unconscious and near death. None of them knew that Vlad had stolen their body's control from them, and in that manner, saved them. Once his company was out of danger and in his doctor's hands, he drew forth his invincible wand, Sherroan, and burned all of the halls of Faradmore, so that no evidence of his passing would remain but ashes. Before him, the shadow demon sat atop his throne, vanquished, beaten. Its body was crushed, its mind was ruined. No longer could it rule its minions of shadow. Its wings were torn and tattered, its black hide was pierced and burned. Its terrible talons were curled in the rigor of death, but still its heart kept beating. Vlad stood above his enemy, a being that had moments before mocked him. "Dare you to challenge the gods, mortal? You are a trifle, and you will die." The once demon lord of shadow would dare not mock him now. Drawing his adamant sword, he cut out its steel-beating heart, placing it in a magical satchel at his waist. All that remained of the demon's spirit was now his, so long as its heart still lived. It was a mighty spirit, as old as the heart of Tempest, but soon its essence would do his bidding and would obey his will. With Sherroan, he burned all that remained of the beast in its halls, and stepped through the still open portal and into his hospital. Deactivating the mirror, he placed it in its secret location among his armor. The infirmary swirled with action as his soldiers were tended to. Of the 46 that he returned with, 10 had died once he'd released his will, but 36 survived, and they would owe him their lives. For the valorous 10 who died, he would have them raised. As long as his power lived, he would never leave behind a fallen comrade, ever. 36 was the same number as found in the company of Drakar Noir. 36 was lucky. "Why do you care about these men, Captain?" his doctor asked. "They fought well this day. Do you find my actions weak, Surgeon?" "Not I, my lord, but it has never been our way to heal defeated warriors." "You will heal them all, Surgeon, even the dead, and if you do not, you will join them." He knew that the old ways still clouded the minds of his people. Eons of surviving in darkness left no room for the weak. But the surface world was a land of different gods, and the Dark Alfar would have to adapt in order to survive. Ultimate victory would require the most open and deductive minds. The old ways of darkness were foolish and counterproductive. His way recruited loyal allies and dedicated men. Only those that opposed him needed to fear. One day, the gods themselves would tremble. "Send me my private physician at once." She was a Lal Selfar slave woman who wished him dead, but her healing skills were unparalleled. She was gifted with divine powers of healing. She never lied. In fact, she openly admitted that she wished that his next battle would also be his last, although she dare not injure him further, knowing his true power. Despite her hatred, she was his only concubine. For wasn't it safer to lie with a woman that you knew hated you than to lie with one who deceived you? "My lord, come in, Ethmiel. I have need of your skills." "I see that you still live, my lord." "Yes, but I have need of you now. Perhaps my next enemy will finish me off and fulfill your greatest desire." "May Corellius make it so." "Well, at least I hope not today. Ask what you might of me, Ethmiel, and I will give it to you if I am able." "My freedom." "Alas, but that is something that I cannot do until my tasks are complete. If I am victorious, you have my word that I will release you from service and see you safely home." "Do you toy with me, my lord?" "The son of Aklon never dies, even to those that hate him." "Then I will wish for your success, my lord." Her ministrations were perfect and almost painless. Stitches, bandages, and salves were applied, and his minor wounds would heal in a short time. Excellent work, Ethmiel. Should I report to your quarters after dinner, my lord? You are a captured slave of Dragonia, Ethmiel, and although you may not know it, you are safer in my care than any other. Report to my quarters each night by my command. I have 2 beds. Within the safety of my abode, you may do as you wish by night. If not for my protection, the light of your soul would be extinguished by others within this fortress that hate you with the unreasoning fear of prejudice. As long as you are my property, they will dare not harm you while I still live. For now, those allying themselves against me are afraid and unorganized, and as long as those conditions remain, you and I will be safe. Thank you, my lord. When in my presence alone, I command you to call me Vlad. Yes, my lord. I must leave you now. Tend to the wounded and then report to my chambers. Despite their frequent engagements, Ethmiel never became pregnant, which he knew to arise from her great knowledge of herbs and preventative ways. But no matter. If he succeeded, then he would need no heir. In time, he might take a wife to aid in his political goals, but where he was going, a union of love would most likely be impossible. Striding through the infirmary, he was proud of his company. The next time that they did battle, they would be even more unified. They would move further and fight harder than any other soldiers, which is, of course, part of the Ranger Creed. All right, that's where we'll end episode 34, at the top of page 373, getting close to the finish. Hope you enjoyed the readings today. Thank you, and have a great night. And as always, read Kerr's Rage, Part 1 of the Duaredheim Staff Saga, and its following novels. Thank you, and have a great night.